All right, what's going on, everybody? It is Wednesday, and Wednesday, of course, means Bitcoin. And don't tell anybody, but our third decided to not show up today, so we can talk about him all hour long if y'all want to.
I don't blame him. He's in Disney World with his family, so kind of hard to be distracted.
I saw him where he said vacation with family, put pictures there, but I was tempted to ask whose family. But I held back. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great. It's a great time to be alive. Never a dull moment.
Man, I'll tell you what. If you're bored these days, man, I think you've got issues, right? You've got things that are kind of that you need to deal with. I think trying to put it nicely here. But, a lot of stuff, like you said, good time to be alive. A lot of stuff going on. Gold's getting near 4,000 there. Silver's almost at 50, right? Silver's about to do the all-time high breakout.
Yeah, and if it does,
it's riding this little golden tricycle around,
Price discovery, I can't remember what the price would need to go to in order for it to get back to its 1/16th ratio to gold.
Yeah,
but it's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot from here. So it'll be fun to see that happen and unfold. I always like to see. I'm just kind of a data junkie.
I'm losing mine.
Did I lose you?
Yeah, I think I lost you. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I said that's going to be fun to see. I'm excited to see how that develops. I'm kind of a data junkie. I also would find it interesting to see how Bitcoin responded to the government shutdown, right? That would have, that's the first time that's ever happened and may never happen again. And to see it go up in spite of that, I think is a telling story that, it's like what we always say is pay attention to, don't listen to the news, but actually look at the substance of what's going on. And that's something that is of great substance, in my opinion. So, it tells you what the world thinks Bitcoin is, which is a hedge, right, at its core. And just to touch on that point, I think that's something that will continue to be fought over as it pertains to what is Bitcoin. And, we knew this battle was coming. We've seen it being fought on a multitude of fronts, including this whole knots core fight. If you guys fight and follow the whole node and Bitcoin improvement protocols, that whole, struggle and fight is all about, it's the central theme of that is, what is Bitcoin for? What is its primary use case? And I am of the opinion.
You were of the opinion. You disappeared there, it looks like. Can anybody else see Tillman there? Oh, no, it looks like we lost him. Well, hey, great. I guess we'll see him in just a minute. You notice his screen's behind him kind of lit up there. And then he disappeared as he was leaning forward doing something. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, man, so really interesting stuff going on here with kind of gold again, reaching toward 4,000, silver, nearing its all-time high there at 50. And there's Mr. Tillman. He's back there. And of course, as Tim was saying, watch what's happening.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion that, it is the best form of collateral that exists. And that's its core value. And I think that's what Wall Street thinks its core value is. And what do I mean by that? Well, collateral is what we use in a debt, driven market, as it pertains to offsetting the books. You've got to have equal debits and credits, right? And so what you want is an asset on one side of the ledger that you can put a ton of liquidity into, without the world going, that's not right, or without it breaking the paradigm of its true value proposition. To give you a good example of that, like, you could make toothpicks the new currency, but at a certain point, if a price of a toothpick was $1,000, there'd be a huge demand for counterfeit toothpicks, right? Because the true price of a toothpick is cents, right? So the more disjointed that becomes, the more counterfeits and the more fraud and all of the things, because there's not true value supporting it. Whereas if you have scarcity in an asset like gold, real estate, there is no faking that. It is or it's not. You either own it or you don't. And Bitcoin has that same intrinsic value. The difference between Bitcoin and real estate and gold is that it's a lot harder to strip out. It's a lot harder to get to a price that seems unjustifiable, because it doesn't matter how high the price of Bitcoin goes. We can always go back to just framing it in the form of sats. If it's easier for the mind to comprehend, we have a lot of flexibility in that department. Whereas, a piece of raw land in Kansas isn't going to ever be looked at as valuable as a piece of raw land in downtown New York, right? So there's this discrepancy across the asset class that doesn't exist inside of Bitcoin. A Bitcoin is a Bitcoin is a Bitcoin is a Bitcoin. And you can put unlimited liquidity into that asset. So to have a lever on one side of the ledger that's big enough for governments across the world to pump liquidity into essentially use as a control mechanism to the global economy, I think it's just too good of an asset and too good of an opportunity for them to pass up. It's going to be adopted and used as that. So back to kind of the fight that we have on our hands, we're going to see that flesh out in a lot of different ways over the next couple of years. But ultimately, there's a saying that comes to mind, which is, he who has the gold makes the rules.
Yeah. Well, and so you mentioned earlier, you kind of brought up the fact that government shutdown. Yeah, that happened. And I think for people that don't know, because it shut down, the odds are that we're not going to get the NFP on Friday. So there's a big piece of, intraday volatility that we're not going to get. Now, it's possible if something's to be passed and we get funding back here pretty quick, that we would at least see a delayed report. But I think for right now, we just kind of assume that it's not happening coming up there. And so, we've got the Fed decision coming up later this, here in a few weeks. And I think, even without that data, I think there's a good chance we might see another cut there with the Fed, which just kind of leads into, everything else with what everybody else is thinking. But I do find it interesting that here we come into, like you said, into October, government shuts down, Bitcoin continues its rate. But by the way, just a real quick kind of thing here. I always say that news events don't create trends, right? Trends are already established. They usually just give some intra-trend volatility. And so that's the same thing here. We've been going up since, what was the day there? Since just last week, I guess, basically. We've been rallying up here. Since the end of last week, we've been, so we were already, in this uptrend from where we were, which is part of the overall bigger, macro uptrend, which hasn't been,
the rising tide.
Yeah. So, here we go. We continue up. Government shutdown comes in. We continue up. No NFP on Friday. I think overall we continue up. And, much to the chagrin of the, believe it or not, I don't know if you've seen it, man, but there are people that still think the top is in.
Yeah. Listen, I think there's always a voice that becomes very loud at the beginning of big movement on both sides, right? There's a lot of people that say the exact opposite. I just think that's the story, is that there's such a wide divide, whether it's whether the sentiment is genuine or not, right? It could be completely fabricated for market reasons. But if it is genuine, that is the story, is how wide of a gap there is in what people think. That is where stories really start. I don't personally think there will be another cut. I think this cut came begrudgingly, and I think there's so much political stuff going on that my bet would be on a pause and then a cut the next round.
December.
But yeah, so that's totally speculation, by the way. I have no idea.
Yeah, yeah.
But that would be my bet. I do think that there's no stopping this train. Bitcoin doesn't care. Bitcoin's programmatically designed to increase in value because it's an indicator. That would be it's no different than if I said to you, hey, this RPM gauge on my car, it seems to go up every time I push the pedal. Yeah, it's an indicator of how hard you're pushing the pedal.
Yeah.
That the faster they print money, the faster Bitcoin's price goes up. That is by design what it is engineered to do, right? Like you could have built Bitcoin. Satoshi at the very beginning, let's break this apart a little bit. He could have said, okay, let's create something to pay for coffee. Let's make a payment system. And a lot of people misinterpret the peer-to-peer payment system. Like it wasn't a peer-to-vendor payment system. It was a peer-to-peer payment system. Very different, very, very different. Peer-to-vendor, you got to have settlement times in less than 2 seconds. When you swipe your credit card, the time between you swiping it and it saying approved and you being able to get out of that line is a big deal.
Yeah.
Like that's a huge, huge deal. So Bitcoin is designed to go back to 10-minute settlement times. So just ask yourself, like, if the architect thought that it should settle every 10 minutes, every block should be minted every 10 minutes into existence, does that sound like a peer-to-vendor payment system, or does that sound more like a store of value, trustless, permissionless transfer mechanism, right? And so I think that if the sooner that the community, the broader community of Bitcoin can leave their own bias behind and say, almost, I hate to say this because Andrew's not here because I'd get massive kudos from him if he was here, but it's kind of like, let's get behind Larry Fink. Whatever he says it is what it is. Again, he who has the gold makes the rules.
Yeah, exactly. And like we've tried to point out so many times before here, again, for people just coming in, they don't really have an economics background or a monetary policy background or all that kind of stuff or investing background. Their first thought is, we need the dollar's going to hyperinflate, and that's what's going to cause Bitcoin to do so great. But as we continue to point out here, it doesn't have to happen, and it's likely not going to happen, right? I mean, we're not even on the precipice of a hyperinflation yet, contrary to what all the armchair economists out there on crypto Twitter and whatnot are saying. But again, we're not looking at the idea that Bitcoin is going to replace the financial system. We're looking that Bitcoin is going to be that base layer, right? It's going to be the pristine collateral for the fiat debasement, I guess you could continue to say, right? As you said earlier, it's that transfer, when you're taking on that debt, and you're creating credit, it's that backing on there that you can kind of transfer that out into. So I think that's important for people to realize. But again, the same thing today as it was in 2017 when I first, January 2017, when I first really got into the Bitcoin community, is this, as human beings, people come into something they don't know, they don't understand, they have no background in, they grab on to the what sounds like it makes a lot of sense. And, it just sounds like it at first, especially if you don't understand what's going on. And then they kind of just repeat that over and over ad nauseum, across social media. And then it doesn't happen, but the price still goes up. And eventually, hopefully, they kind of get in there, because I don't think what you said about the 10-minute thing, I don't think most people know that, or most people really even understand that. Again, when we talk about the difficulty to mine the Bitcoin, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about.
Well, I can nerd out with you on that and explain it for people who care.
Yeah, go ahead, man.
Yeah, so miners are guessing numbers That's what all the computing power and all the electricity consumption is doing. And think about it like there's a lottery number out there, and that lottery number is being guessed by every miner. And if you guess that lottery number correctly, you have the unique and the pristine and the prestigious opportunity to submit to the community the next block ledger. And that's a block of transactions that say this wallet wants to send this many Bitcoin to this wallet, this wallet. And so that ledger, if it's right, which means if all of the transactions are capable of taking place, that one wallet has the Bitcoin to send that it's trying to send, and the other wallet has a wallet to receive it. Once that is proven, what it does is it starts through the community of nodes getting approval that it is right. So everybody starts going, yep, it's right. And all these computers start piling on saying, this transactional ledger, this block of transactions is correct. When you get 51% of those people saying that it's correct, you have minted the new block on the Bitcoin blockchain. And that is the new link that has all of those transactions on it that are now permanent. They have been settled for all eternity, and they are now inscribed in the chain as being done. So the balances are updated at that point. Everything is, there's no clawing back. You have confirmations across the network. Like that's the beauty of the instant settlement mechanism. And that's how it works. So when you're a node, when you can run the Bitcoin original code, right? But there's some lack of functionality to it in the fact that like SegWit and or the wallet addresses that we attribute to Bitcoin was an improvement. It was more complicated and harder before that. And so they've made these improvements along the way. But the main reason why they've been improving that protocol is to improve the money that we call Bitcoin. And so all of that is going on behind the scenes, right? And so when you talk about the number that those miners are guessing, right? That the chain is created as the lottery winning number. Every time you add a digit to it, it becomes, a lot harder to guess, right? Because think about it, if you have a 1 in 1,000 chance of guessing, and then you take it to 1 in 10,000, you've moved an order of magnitude up, 10x the probability, right? So think about a huge chain of numbers that you're trying to guess as a miner. And that's why there's so much computing power inside the network sitting there guessing all the time. And all it's doing is just randomly guessing. And boom, one of them hits the winner. Well, the time that it takes the whole global community of miners to guess that number is being counted by the protocol. And the protocol is written to increase the difficulty of that number or decrease the difficulty of that number to make it settle in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Not 9 minutes, not 1 minute. It doesn't look at it as an improvement to settle it in lower time. It looks at it as perfect math to settle it in 10 minutes. So just think about that design and that architecture and say, like, was that design intended for me to stand in Starbucks and buy a cup of coffee and wait 10 minutes before Starbucks lets me get out of line? No, it doesn't. It's a completely different use case. And it's like digital gold, right? It's like if I was going to settle with you in gold, it would take me time to unload it and load it, right?
Bring that wheelbarrow, man.
Yeah, bring that wheelbarrow. So that it would take some time. And that's what it's meant to do. But once it's settled, once you leave with the gold, there's no getting it back. It's gone. And so it's a digital gold. It's a 2.0. So anybody who, is interested in the behind the scenes network of Bitcoin, become a miner, open up a node. Go get a computer and start a node on it. It's not hard. There's tons of literally plug and play instructions online, and it will give you an appreciation for the value of the Bitcoin network, because that's really what the price reflects. The price reflects the computational value of the network that has been built to do this purpose. And so if you look at Facebook, you would measure their value and how many users.
Yeah.
Same thing with Bitcoin. How many users? Well, we have an adoption curve that there isn't any technology out there that can beat. It's the best out there. So, buying a piece of that network seems, just because it's not centralized doesn't mean you don't own a piece of the network. That's literally what Bitcoin is.
There you go. There you go. And so I think one of the biggest news things to come out here, according, with Bitcoin, especially with all the, you got strategy, you got all these Bitcoin treasuries coming out, was this corporate alternative minimum tax, the CAMT. And it's been, up until recently, it's been really, what's the word I'm looking for here? It's been vague, right? It's been this idea of, well,
murky.
Do Bitcoin treasury companies, those that are just holding Bitcoin, are they going to have to pay this alternative minimum tax, which is basically a, the CAMT was enacted in 2022. It's a 15% tax, minimum tax on corporations that have over $1 billion in annual income. And it's based on their financial statement income rather than taxable income. So if you're holding Bitcoin, it basically means, oh my God, do I have to pay 15% of that value in it? And so, if you're a company that holds Bitcoin, well, obviously that's going to affect you. You got to start paying taxes on unrealized income. And if you are an investor, well, obviously that's going to, influence what you're doing, because if the company has to pay those taxes on that, all of a sudden that gives you a whole different view of the company and what they're doing. But anyway, Treasury comes out and they clarify that, hey, listen, you don't have to. It wasn't clear that digital assets were exempt from this, but now Treasury's come out and said, okay, it is exempt. So I guess you can go ahead and continue to invest in Strategy and Naka and all these other companies. What's the one over there in Japan? The big one in Japan.
Meta
Planet. Yeah.
Well, it just sounds like they're regulatorily giving the green light for publicly traded companies to hold Bitcoin. And it's similar to what they did when they changed the accounting rules regarding banks being able to hold Bitcoin and not treat it like a liability. That was kind of a little known but huge development in the space. Early in Trump's presidency, they changed the accounting laws. It used to be where if you held Bitcoin on a balance sheet of any kind as a bank, you had to treat it like a liability, which means you had to have an offsetting amount of cash on the other side of the ledger, which no bank wants to. They don't. That is the deal killer. Like that, right. That keeps everybody from owning it at that level and holding it and using it for their customers and providing services around it and all of that integration. That is the deal killer that kept that from happening. When they removed that and said, okay, well, you can hold Bitcoin and you can treat it like an asset. You don't have to treat it like a liability, which means you don't have to have a counter asset on your balance sheet to offset that liability. You can actually use Bitcoin to offset other liabilities. Massive gate switch or opening there. Same thing here, right? But just in a different way. It's more, geared towards or focused on these treasury companies in the public sector and what the rules are pertaining to public companies, holding Bitcoin specifically. I think that's a huge deal.
Yeah. And so, great thing there. Takes the pressure off those companies that were looking to do that. Maybe they're looking to come in and do that. Kind of green lights the retail investor to go in there and, take advantage of investing in these companies if that's what they want to do. So that to me was probably the biggest news, I think, coming out of this last week or so. Bitcoin's rallied up. Now we're up. Let's see. I mentioned we've been coming up since the end of last week. We're up here right around 8.5%. So we've been rallying from 108 and some change up now to 117 and some change. So almost $10,000. And like I said, 8.5%, right? It's crazy when you think about it, but you know, it is what it is. And here we go up into the top half of the range. You know, I think we're, you know, headed for the breakout here. I think that's the low there as it's been. So we're going to have pullbacks along the way. But, you know, I kind of posted on Twitter earlier, if you're not long Bitcoin, you're wrong. And I continue to believe that. So
I just think I look at these moments of, you know, where you see massive buying floors step in after consolidation, after massive legs up. You know, these are classic bull flags. And you know, I look at Bitcoin's, you know, price, the probability of it going below 100,000 to me again in the next 24, 48 months is growing increasingly small. Not saying it can't happen, but when you have a massive consolidation, well, first of all, when we first broke 100,000, that tree was shaken for weeks. Remember, back and forth.
People are saying, yeah, it can't even stay above 100,000.
Well, and then it went down to 79, and everybody was like, 100,000. That was the top. You know, it was like this massive shaking event. Well, we've gone above 100,000, well above 123, I think was the top. And then now we've consolidated now above 100,000 with good margin above 100. Like we haven't gone down to 101.
Right.
I think the lowest we got was 107, wasn't it? We just touched it.
Yeah, right about 107. Yeah.
Bought back up to 109. So, you know, I just look at it as new, you know, when you have a breakout, like we've said, wait for the retest. We've had the retest. This is the most probable point to buy with the least amount of risk, in my opinion, based on what I've seen in the price action. And so, you know, that's exciting. That means we might be due for another leg up here, unless, you know, barring some outside influence, you know. Yeah,
well, I mean, you know, in about time, you know, everybody getting, you know, this cycle, I think, has been so much more strange than the previous ones, because again, as we've said, you know, again, these things we talk about all the time, right? It's been up, sideways for a while, up, sideways for a while, right? Whereas before it was like up, good pullback, up, good pullback, right? And now we're just kind of, as Andrew, you know, would say if he was here, and you know, maybe we can poke a little fun at him here. I don't know, but you know, it's this idea that the floor is rising, so we're getting a higher ceiling, but also that floor is coming up there, and we're building bases on that floor as it rises every time. It's not just a simple pullback and a rally back up. So you know, I think this has been a really controlled, you know, rally, especially since like January of 2023 when the Bitcoin ETFs first launched. And so since then, it's just been this controlled move up. And I think, you know, if you're trying to guess a top right now, I think, you know, guessing tops is always a pain in the butt anyway. Shouldn't be doing it. But I think especially this time around, I think you're just doing the wrong thing. Stop trying to guess tops and just keep playing it up until it gives you a reason to you know, for it to be headed down.
You know, I'd be looking at, again, the people who are building things that take years to implement and execute. There's so much infrastructure build out happening right now. It's insane. And the M&As, you know, activity that we've seen this year pick up, and all of the expansion and the new public companies and the treasury company, like we're just, this is the first inning of the game. We haven't even, like, this is the first year after Wall Street recognized Bitcoin as a financial instrument. Think about that. It's literally been 1 year. We're not even halfway through the second 12 months, you know, period of time. That's the beginning. That's not the end. These people don't move fast like retail does. They build for years and years and years with the whole point of adoption. Right. So they're building things that people will use, and that's going to bring even a higher floor, in my opinion, because more people are going to have to own the asset to participate in the markets. And with DeFi and the technology like Flare offers that we've talked about, you know, DeFi staking for treasury companies, I don't think people have really put their minds around how big of a deal that is, because as a treasury company, if you can own an asset that has a 79% CAGR like Bitcoin does, and like these Bitcoin treasury balance sheet companies are looking at Bitcoin to provide, And on top of that, you can get a yield of 5, 6, 7%. I mean, are you kidding me?
Yeah,
It's
what are you
like,
doing not being involved,
yeah,
right?
well, I mean, it's just going to be. And so I think that whole ecosystem is about to explode. And I think it's not an accident. Again, look at the Trump family. What was one of the precursors to him being in office was they started World Liberty Financial,
Yep.
which, what is that? It's a DeFi market. You know, it's just like, come on, this is like right in front of us as to what's going to happen. So, you know, it's exciting times. I think there's a lot of interconnectivity that will be recognized, and partnerships, and no different than the Coinbase American Express partnership. Like, think about how many headlining partnerships have come out in the last 6 months. Well, that's only going to amplify. That's only going to intensify, in my opinion. How about the lady that got caught with more?
I was about to say, yeah. So we're talking about how great this is, and then you've got this Chinese national. She was caught. I guess she'd been on the lam for about 5 years here. They finally caught her. She admitted in court, but they seized 61,000 Bitcoin. I mean, the only person that's kind of coming comparable to that, you know, in terms of companies is like Strategy, right? It's
It should tell it.
billion.
Listen, it should worry you and excite you at the same time.
Absolutely insane. But basically, yeah, and basically, from what I'm understanding about it, they were scamming people in China and then taking the proceeds and putting it into Bitcoin and trying to launder that through Bitcoin.
Yeah.
$6.7 billion in Bitcoin is what she was holding that she lost.
Well, this is the maturing of the markets. It doesn't happen like this in most cases. But this is when we say that, you know, no one invited me to the IPO of Tesla.
Yeah.
Well, this lady was invited to the IPO of Bitcoin. That's just the facts, man. So, you know, you get the price you deserve. She relied on the utility of Bitcoin very early on. I don't know what the scam was, and you know, God help us as a world if scams get that big, you know, undetected. But it's shocking. It's a number that you would only like. That's a fairy tale number, in my opinion. But I'm curious whether she was targeted through the blockchain.
Yeah.
Because that would be a story that's worth telling, because you know how everybody's like, you know, cryptos for criminals and blah, blah, blah. Well, if she was paid out in cash, like you could talk about a lot of criminals, you know, over the course of, you know, the last couple of decades, from the cartel's perspective, for example, or the mob's perspective. Like they had hordes of cash, hordes of it buried,
buried everywhere.
Everywhere. People
never find
flooding, you know, houses, and so you talk about that, and you go, okay, well, that never catches the criminal. Well, if they literally were looking on the top 10 list of Bitcoin holders and going, who is that?
Yeah, who is this woman? 40-year-old woman. Where's she from?
And we can see, you see what I'm saying? Like that could have been the very thing that helped, you know, catch her.
See, and they always, you know, government, man, these people in government who argue that Bitcoin is this way for people to hide money. What I'm looking at this BBC report here that's talking about this case. Let me see here. It says, wait, what did they say here? They basically just talked about how that, you know, the rise of Bitcoin to launder money and fraudulent things, whatever. And I'm thinking the same thing. I'm like, it's all a public blockchain. It's not hidden. It's not overly difficult to trace Bitcoin back to where it's coming from. And if you got some Yahoo in the middle of nowhere coming up all of a sudden worth $7 billion, you're like, I might need to check that out, see what's going on over there, you know?
Well, talk about collateral, right? They're going to get that Bitcoin, right? Or it's going to be gone forever. But it's not, it's pristine collateral. It really is. So the question will be is, how do they try to recover it? If they recover it, how do they get it back to the victims? You know, that's all thing.
128,000 victims.
That's what I heard. That's a lot of victims.
Crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. But
yeah.
Personally, I don't know, man. I dare even say this because everybody go, "Oh, you're going to fraud people." I said, "No, if I was to fraud people, I really don't think that Bitcoin would be my first place I'd be looking to put that money, you know?"
Well, to your point, the argument is invalid. It's a public ledger.
Yeah.
Like it's literally that when this woman goes into whatever court or jurisdiction that she has to answer to, they're going to have the smoking gun, and they didn't have to find it. They didn't have to search for it. They just went on the computer and pulled up the wallet address, printed the ledger out. Do you see what I'm saying? So yeah. I can't even fathom that argument being legitimized in today's age. It's just a totally invalid argument.
Well, and when you look at it, it kind of makes you wonder, we're in this all day, every day, and it seems like everybody knows about Bitcoin, right? But at the end of the day, really, it isn't that big a deal throughout the world, right? Throughout the mainstream populace. And so it kind of makes you wonder here. So are these government officials who are like, "Oh, look, fraudulent activity is increasing and people are trying to launder through Bitcoin and blah, blah, blah." Do they really know what we're talking about here in the public ledger and all this idea? Or do they really think that's possible?
If I had to guess,
viable way to do it.
What's the old saying? Never assume malice when you can point to ignorance.
Yeah.
You
used a nicer word than I would have, but yeah.
So you have to kind of assume that people just don't get it, is what I would go with first. Thinking. And I think a lot of politicians will hear things like, I think there's some immunity that you get when you just regurgitate what's in the AP. And I think politicians are very risk adverse.
Yeah.
So coming up with an original news narrative or coming up with an original narrative to speak on is something that has increasingly become more dangerous, because if you misspeak, you're crucified, you're done. As a politician, you're almost inherently built to just regurgitate things that you can ultimately blame on other people if they're wrong. And so you look at a lot of the politicians and kind of what they stand behind. Most of their narrative comes straight from the AP, and it's things like, Silk Road enabled this many billions of dollars of illicit activity through Bitcoin. Well, yeah, but how much did the US dollar do this year in drug?
There you go. Exactly.
It's all comparative. You know what I mean? Again, we're not saying it's a perfect system, and we're not saying that criminals won't use it. We're just saying it'll be easier to find them if they do.
Yeah.
That sounds like an improvement to the current system to me.
And if that's really your focus, then maybe you should focus on the one that's, a magnitude of 10 or 100 times, 1,000 times more likely to be used for illicit activities versus the little thing, that's there. But, who wants to do that, right? It's much more, it's much more fun to get out there and say, "Oh, Bitcoin bad." Bang, bang.
Well, I think it riles up the most response, right? And that's another part of the equation that, is just part of the nature of the media. Even in social media, people say stuff just to troll, just to get you to respond. And they know it's not even true, or they don't even care if it's true, or they haven't even done any research. They just know they posted about it another time and the impressions were higher, and the Twitter analytics told them that touched a nerve. And so they just keep touching that nerve over and over again. And they don't even care whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent. It's serving the purpose for them that they're looking for it to serve, which is to get attention.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny. You say that about, government and, government officials, and how, it's easier just to kind of regurgitate what everybody else is saying. And that leads me right back to money managers, generally speaking. The thing I say, which is everybody herds in the markets, including your money managers, because it is, if they go out on a limb and do something different than the other money managers are doing, and it doesn't work out, then they're really, really bad, right? But if they do what everybody else is doing and everybody goes down, then hey, we're with everybody else, you know. And it's funny, you know, how that kind of plays out. But that's a reality when you get into markets, right? You know, everybody herds in markets. You got to figure out who's herding where and why, and then you've got to do what you need to do versus just kind of blindly following along. Following the herd in the middle of a trend, whether it's up or down, is easy, right? But it's when you get to those extremes where you know, that's where you have to really start, you know, thinking on your own, and so you can get out instead of losing money with them.
Well, the key to that is to follow people. I think that the vast majority of the value that I've harvested out of the crypto market has been attached to learning from pioneers in the space, like listening to them talk about it and understand why they're talking about it the way they're talking about it. And what's great about that is it requires critical thought. You know what you're investing in. You can get behind the premise and the people behind the premise. Like all of those things are good from an investor's perspective. But what it does is it shows you that you know, there's a lot of diversity in the crypto space, left and right, and really none of it matters. Because we're able to look past into this central truth that we're more interested in helping develop and create behind. And so I just think that as we move forward, politicians are going to use the crypto space as a means to manipulate a bigger and bigger crowd, which is it's a compliment, but it's also dangerous because they don't have a clue what they're talking about, right? And they don't know what's good for the space. They don't understand. Most of them don't understand traditional economics, much less crypto economics. And you know, the consequences in crypto are, think about it like this. If the US government could write code as it pertains to law, and they could go, if you speed over 55 miles an hour on this road, your car will limit you. You cannot go over 55. So you have no freedom of choice in that. And if they implemented that, which they would have every desire to, they would control the physical universe. Well, there's a new universe that's been created that has that system in it. And it is extraordinary for control and the cost of control. And so this is, again, I think we talked about this earlier. I think this is the beginning of something that is equally scary as it is exciting, as we see this technology kind of impact every facet of our lives, including control and political control. In an age of AI, I will tell you this, and I think you've talked about this a lot as it pertains to protecting data with computing power, right? And proving a library of truth with that mechanism, which I think is something exceptionally valuable. And I think that, it will be the thing that allows us to decipher between manipulated AI information and generated content versus real content, because that's like changing our paradigm right in front of our faces and we're ignoring it. I have 4 kids. What's happening with AI and college education and high school education is the massive elephant in the room that we're all kind of just ignoring and going, doesn't exist. It's reshaping education. Teachers are having to scrub papers with AI to see whether it was written with AI. And that's an arms race that will not be perfected, and there'll be huge gaps, and it's going to absolutely change what we think of as a diploma, because you're not going to be able to prove your competency other than putting it on a proof of work blockchain in some capacity and then securing it that way.
Yeah, because I mean, there's a lot of people who, they think that, there's these AI detectors out there, and they're all at varying levels of whether they can really kind of, figure it out or not. But the reality of it is, even these that claim to be the best of the best still tell you, listen, don't just run this through and say automatically they're definitely written by AI. use it as a starting point, and you have to do other things to figure out if maybe it's AI. So this is kind of something that I've thought about and kind of posited in the past, which is, so if, how do you win, right? If you're a college, a degree granting institution, if you're a teacher, how do you do this? Because, okay, a lot of people are going with ChatGPT to write or something else to write, right? Some kind of AI. But the problem is AI is really just mimicking what writing should look like, should actually look like real, good, well done writing. And so if people, and so in order to defeat, these AI kind of things, you've got to dumb down your writing. You've got to make really messy writing.
I think it's a full circle event. I think it's a full circle event that brings human face-to-face interaction to the forefront again, right? How do you prove? It's proof of work, right? In a world of fraud, of money, credit card fraud, bank fraud, all these fraud, Bitcoin is, through proof of work, the final frontier. It's the thing that solves all of that. Well, human face-to-face interaction is the thing that solves all those problems. Yeah. And it's the cheapest to implement. It's what we all used to do before we found ourselves buying screens all the time. Yeah. But like, there will not be a substitute for heart surgeons or things that we want at the end of the day to put around a human being and not around AI. Like, do you at the end of the day want a robot working on you? Or do you want a person working on you that has 40 years of surgical experience and has done 5,000 plus surgeries, and that can look you in the eye before the surgery and go, I've got you taken care of, man. Yeah. Like that, there's certain things that we're going to always desire a human touch or a human involvement, because there's a level of comfort and there's a level of love that is extended through those times. Well, AI and robotics is going to commoditize everything that it can, right? Everything that it can will be commoditized. Oh, you want to write a paper? Boom. But that's best paper you've ever read. Oh, you want to, so it's free and it's scalable and it's available for everyone. And so it will change the way we use tools. Like calculators are completely obsolete. Why do I want to type in calculations manually when I can say, Grok, what can you give me the detailed explanation of this problem and the solution behind it? And teaches me how to do it. It's gonna replace a lot of stuff.
Well, now here's the thing: teaches you how to do it. See, that's the thing. What they're finding, they're doing these psychological studies now, and neuroscience studies on people, and what they're finding is those who are just getting the answers, just getting them. They're basically their brain shutting down. So we got a question here from one of the people in the audience, says, why will we even want to learn when the answers are free to access? And that's the interesting thing, right? Because it's not even just as they're accessing the information with ChatGPT or whatever the AI is, but it's afterward. They continue to operate at a lower level. And so when I look at it, because we've talked so much about AI and blockchain and all these things as we head into the future, how we're making this leap now from where we were to where we are now, and how this kind of pushes us up, kind of exponentially. And I think it's important, if you're using AI, that you're actually back and forth. You're thinking, you have to think. It can't be a simple, like, well, why do we want to learn if we can just get the answer? Well, because it makes you an idiot. That's why it makes you really, your brain stops doing the things that it usually does.
There is no dopamine release in AI when it creates something new.
Yeah.
And there is in humans. And we chase that. That's what makes us creative. When we think we've done something that no one else has done, we get a real high off of that. Some would argue the highest high. And the more impactful that creation is, the more powerful you become. Look at Elon Musk. Some would argue most powerful, influential man in the world. What did he do? He just created. And the creations were so powerful that we all had to use them. And we all thought they were genius. And we all started going, that guy knows something we don't know, right? And so AI it can always be a great regurgitator of what has been created. and it can show you, but it will never create new things. And so what I look at AI as doing is it's an accelerator to creation. It allows you to try on 100 different types of creative measures and measure the outcome of those much quicker and more simply than you could ever do. Yeah. You used to have to run A/B testing for years to collect enough data to go, oh, well, this is the trend that my company should focus on. Now you can run it through simulations, tens of millions of simulations that will give you such accurate data based upon the relative information it can gather in the world about demand economics and population growth. And like, it can extrapolate so much and weigh it into those decisions, and then take levels of probability of outcome and growth of all of those and model out 50 million computations and go, well, here's the most probable. It's very similar to what they do with hurricane path predictions, right? They just run simulation, thousands and thousands of simulations, and they go, here's the most probable 5 paths, right? We don't know where it's going, but it's going to go one of these 5 to the tune of 90%. You know, still don't know. There's an outlier out there of 10%. It could go anywhere, but this is what it looks like model wise.
Yeah. And, you know, so going back to kind of what we were talking about initially there, you know, this idea of these AI checkers and whatnot, you know, the one thing I warned about is that, you know, if as a society, we put more and more support in that and belief in that, I think, you know, that just helps dumb us down. Because so when you go to learn to write, right, here's the thing, when you go to learn to write, there is a way to write. That doesn't mean everybody writes the same way, but there is a form and a function in the way in which you write that's considered good writing, right? And so ChatGPT and other AI systems are, you know, trained on a lot of this. That's the best way to write. So it's kind of like this kind of catch-20, right? So AI writes as you're supposed to write. And then if you're writing as you're supposed to write, oftentimes you can get flagged as AI from there as well. So kids who are at school, but here, let me get to where I'm getting point here. So the point is, a lot of these teachers get on there and because they're overworked or whatever, they just put like all complete trust in her. And if their AI checker says, oh, they're writing AI, well, then they're like, hey, you're flunked, you're getting kicked out of school, which we've had a few of these already happening, you know, with the college and whatever. And so then students who may actually write pretty well are going to dumb down their writing, which means they dumb down their thinking. Man, somebody here says idiocracy on steroids, and I can't help but think, man,
listen,
left unchecked, that's where we head.
I think that it exposes a weakness in the education system. If you're forcing kids to do mundane tasks that can be easily reproduced at a higher level with a machine,
yes,
then you're teaching them to focus on the wrong thing, which is like that this AI is a threat to human thought. My premise would be is use AI to create more and use it to do the research quicker and to grasp deeper concepts, because we only have so much attention span that we can dedicate to anything. So the faster we can fast forward through human, you know, history of learning and get to the part what we don't understand, the faster we innovate into that space, right, as a humankind. And AI is going to make that possible at a rate that we've never seen if we teach our kids how to use it. So what I think education should be doing, instead of resisting it, they should be admitting defeat. You know what, kids? The age of our old writing is gone. You need to be able to dictate, and they should be practicing dictation, in my opinion. That is the future art form of humankind that is going to be the hardest to displace. Can AI stand up in front of a crowd of 100,000 people and rile it up like a human being can? No, it cannot, and it never will be able to. So we need to push our kids into understanding what their highest and best use is creative thoughts. And the quicker they can get those thoughts into this universe organized, and people start recognizing the beauty of it and adoption of that, the quicker we move as a human race. That's the way I look at it.
And I completely agree, man. I think that's exactly how it should be used. You know, that's the way when I'm teaching my son who's 14 right now, you know, that's the way I teach him with that. I'm like, listen, I don't want you ever just kind of coming up there and asking questions and being just blankly doing that. AI should be a tool that you use to expand your creativity in whatever it is, whether it's writing or, you know, I don't know, you know, we think of creative endeavors, right? Like writing books or writing screenplays, stuff like that, right? Because a lot of people have really fantastic ideas. They just don't know how to do that other part of it, right? That other part. But so the idea with AI should be helping you expand on these great ideas you have and these novel ideas you have to be able to get it, right? And in that way, I think AI actually makes you smarter. It helps you versus what, unfortunately, like you said, the way we're teaching, I think is wrong. That we're teaching this dumbed down approach, this simple approach. And it's when we think about that, it's the same thing with jobs, right? Everybody's fearful that AI is going to take all the jobs. No, it's not going to take all the jobs. First of all, it's going to create other jobs.
Yep.
Second of all, it will take the mundane, the word you used was great, mundane, right? I've got a law degree. AI is going to absolutely take out those first year associate jobs, a lot of the paralegal job. But AI
it wouldn't have replaced all of O.J. Simpson's lawyers? Those guys are why? Because oral presentation will always be a thing, right? Yeah. People standing up in front of other people and delivering a message that stirs the soul is what humans crave. That's what we long for. That's what politicians literally master manipulate you through. Like that is what we're all about. That's why we all follow celebrities. That's why we buy brands that make us feel good about attaching ourselves to people that we admire behind the brand. That's how our brains work. So yeah, I think AI, I think we should be asking ourselves the questions, how do we use this? Even Michael Saylor said in one of his speeches, I use AI to flesh out my ideas before I take it to any of my lawyers or any of my marketing team or anything. And so that's the way that we should be approaching AI. And that's the way I try to teach my kids to approach it, is like, ask it questions from a neutral stance. Like I'll use AI in this way. I don't understand either side of an argument. So I want you to explain to me why both sides are as passionate as they are and what the root issue of the argument is, right? That's an exceptional third-party view that you can't very well find with even any of your friends. I can't call you and go, hey, you know, I got this disagreement between two of my other buddies. Well, you don't have enough information to make a good call, right? Whereas if I can if I can dictate what my problem is in such detail to AI, and I can say to it, like, I want to understand it from both sides, I can get out of that something that I can't get anywhere else, which is going to help me as a human. Same thing is if I say, you know, if I own a company and I go, you know, I'm selling wrenches and I own a hardware store and it's a proprietary wrench and I want to know why my sales are slumping. I can keep feeding information into a conversation over the course of a year that AI continues to build on, and you're refining. It's like machine learning against your problem set that you don't have to get a solution today. It doesn't have enough information. But as months build and you go, I spent this much money in advertising on Facebook this month, and I got an increase in sales by this month, and you start feeding it information over a period of time, you're going to have a perspective that you can't get without an exceptional partner that cares about your business and loves it and wants to put a lot of time, effort, and energy into it, because the manual computations that it would take to get to those answers is a huge amount of human manpower or man hours. Like, it just takes a lot more time for a human to do these things than AI.
Yeah, exactly. And man, you know, so let me see. What are they saying here? Been a while since you guys have been in court. 90% are done virtually. If we can have a podcast that we can't tell our AI, then we'll have representation virtually in the form of a person, maybe, but AI. Yeah, but still, you know, again, the ideal is, I think it comes, you know, again, because I do have a degree in law, and I think it's a good place to look at it. At the end of the day, people are going to want that human reassurance if they're going to court, right? You don't want, you know, an AI lawyer to kind of do that. Somebody that you don't feel like feels the importance of you winning, you know, that you can't look in their eyes and feel that they're really focused on this case or not, right? And I think that's where we still win. I think that's still, you know, like you said, that face-to-face, that eye-to-eye kind of thing. And so when we're looking at that, as the future comes up, you know, you've got AI coming in here, you've got Bitcoin, you've got, you know, digital blockchain stuff. You know, you've got hash power as security. When you're looking at, I mean, I think, you know, again, I think it takes us from where we were, and it exponentially jumps us up, you know, on this road to where we're headed. But I don't think everything becomes completely AI, because as human beings, who's going to trust that?
Well, I think it's an and both. It's the question is who would you trust more? And so you have three options in front of you. I always like to deduce it down to actual decision tree, you know, type just, you know, information. You got three options in front of you. You have a AI only robot that can represent you in court. And imagine did I lose you again, or am I still here?
No, I'm here.
Okay.
Still good.
Imagine a very sensitive case. Your life hangs in the balance of this case, right? Yeah. So you got three options. You got a robot that can represent you, that's tapped into the entire universe of information, every case law, every precedence, every relationship amongst judges, and it's drawing from everything. Imagine the Would you rather? So you can have that. You can have a lawyer that's just all human and does nothing but what his intuition or her intuition tells him or her. Or you can have the human that has the AI behind it, that's taking all of that universe and deducing it into a way that speaks to the human soul, i.e. the jury. I'm taking option 3 every day of the week. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. You want that AI out there doing all that basic, easy stuff, but at the end of the day,
but the moral of the story is the people who win adopt this.
Your creativity,
they adopt it as, you know,
you're understanding how it approaches. Yeah, exactly. Because, you know, again, it's you know, I see a comment here. It says, I'd rather have an AI that knows every case precedence that has ever existed. Hopefully the law moves to a more fact-based outcomes versus swag lawyers that stretch the truth or flat out lie to get a win for their client. But, you know, here's the truth. Most lawyers aren't out there lying. And I know everybody loves to hate lawyers until they need one, right? And then even when they get it, they hate them. But the reality is most of them aren't out there lying. And those that do usually get caught. But the approach is, how do you approach the case, right? That's what is the question of law that you're putting in front of the judge? And a good lawyer will find a question in front of the judge that they've got a better chance of being successful with than not, right? And that's where it is. Everybody thinks it's everybody thinks the laws are very black and white. And then they're like, but man, they did that, so they should, why are they going free? Well, because what you're thinking isn't actually what happened.
Well, if you're choosing the absolute black and white single line in the sand for your representation as a lawyer, then that would mean that you would choose that as your judge. And I would warn you against that, because there's a lot of nuance in sentencing. There's a lot of nuance in just the human being and who you're putting in jail. And you do not want a judge that sees everything as the black and white. Who was that really great judge that has so many clips? Judge Frank Caprio, you know him? He was like 90 years old, and there was a lot of YouTube clips of him because he had so much compassion on the people that came before him. Like, let me give you a good example. This woman that was like, 101 came in and she owed $30 for a parking ticket. And it was because she couldn't get her handicap permit, but she had a hard time getting back to the car in time before the meter ran out. And it was a joke. Like, Judge Frank was like, yo, we should be paying you for coming out to, and it was all about mercy because the extenuating circumstances slapped you in the face. Yeah. AI wouldn't see it that way. They'd go, violation.
Yep, that's it.
Sentencing, throw her in the slammer. You know what I mean? And
have fun in the pokey, Grandma.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to live in that universe. I think humans have the ability to extend mercy, and I think that's one of the invaluable traits of humans.
Agreed, man. I agree with you completely. And we are here. We've been doing this for a bit over an hour, so hopefully everybody's enjoyed it. We kind of went off on a little AI thing there at the end, but
hey, we're having fun. What counts away, the mice will play. Andrew's not here to slap us about this stuff. So,
yeah, and again, it's all about, the future, right? I mean, this is Beards and Bitcoin, but it's really, what are we looking at technology-wise as the future kind of comes in? And a lot of it, I think, is going to be based around Bitcoin. It's going to be based around, digital currencies. It's going to be based around hash power, security, which is all kind of intertwined. And I think, again, AI becomes a part of that. And so I think it's good to have these little kind of conversations along the way. But that's going to do it for us today. I appreciate you showing up, Mr. Holloway, as always, putting the sat in satire, in case nobody noticed that there under your name. I don't know, y'all. I think I'm going to collect these for a year, and I'm going to just release a book with all of them in there and a screenshot from each show of you guys. We'll do that.
I think I proved myself how big of a nerd I am because I laughed a lot about coming up with that one. And I didn't use AI. It was all coming out of this news.
It was all from your noggin, huh? All right. Well, hey, listen, everybody. Thank you so much. Coming on in, guys. We enjoy y'all coming in, and we enjoy your comments and your questions and whatnot. We're not here to say you have to believe us. We're just here giving our viewpoint. A lot of it based on, a lot of years in markets and with Bitcoin and digital currency tech and everything like that. So we'll see how things continue to progress here. We'll see if the government decides to go back to work anytime soon. But as always, remember, the only thing you control, as Mr. Holloway will definitely get behind me on this, is how much you lose. That's it. Y'all have a great week. Trade safe. Be safe out there, and we'll see you guys.
I'm going to let you have it this show, but that's the last time.
Take care, man. We'll see you next week.
See ya.
Trading tip: always manage risk before chasing gains.